Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
All right, let's zoom in on a classic paradox in cinematic history. You know the name, Carl Theodor Dreyer. He's the filmmaker whose very essence, it just seems synonymous with solemnity. Concentrating on these grand, agonizing moral dilemmas, delivering works of almost painful, dignified, cerebral intensity.
You're talking about the master who gave us The Passion of Joan of Arc and Day of Wrath. I mean, films that just burrow into your soul.
Exactly.
But what you're hinting at is the massive surprise lurking right at the start of his career.
That's the twist. Early in his career, the same man produced a film that our sources describe, astonishingly, as a folk tale full of humor, sometimes verging on the ribald.
Wow.
It's a tonal whiplash that forces us to redefine his whole artistry,
We are using the comprehensive film history provided by cinema, the magic vehicle, to unpack this essential yet often overlooked early film. Dreyer's 1921 work, The Parson's Widow, or Prästänkan, which he made in Sweden.
And our mission is simple: to quickly grasp how a giant of serious philosophical cinema began his professional life with something so earthy, so lighthearted, and so realistic. We want to know how that foundation built the master we recognize today.
To understand that versatility, we first have to look at the workshop where he honed his technical skill, the massive machine of Danish cinema at the time.
Let's start with his apprenticeship. Dreyer spent 7 crucial years, from 1908 to 1915, at the Nordic film company. And this wasn't some minor internship.
No, not at all.
He was deeply involved, producing ideas for scripts, writing intertitles, and working as an editor. He learned the mechanics of filmmaking inside and out.
That 7-year immersion in the studio system meant he wasn't just a theorist, he was an industry professional. Our source notes that when he made his feature debut in 1919 with Prästänkan, it was already a piece of technically excellent filmmaking.
He had mastered the machine.
He had.
And the machine he was mastering, the Danish film industry of that era, was truly dominant. It was prosperous, exporting its product globally. Think of it as one of the early cinematic powerhouses, almost like the European Hollywood of the moment.
Yes, and that power resulted in some definite high points. Our sources credit figures like Benjamin Christensen with establishing great narrative fluency, meaning they knew how to stage complex scenes and tell a story efficiently,
Right.
often requiring fewer clumsy intertitles than their peers.
Plus, Denmark had a massive advantage because their flourishing theater scene supplied excellent, well-trained stage actors who could naturally transition to the screen. And visually, their signature style of using dark, moody interiors was highly effective.
The ingredients for masterpieces were clearly there, but here's the major constraint Dreyer faced. Despite the technical brilliance and the acting talent, the low points were crippling.
Which were what, exactly?
Our sources are blunt. The scripts were often terrible. They featured this fatalistic mood that wasn't an artistic choice, but was really just commercial pandering. They were designed to appeal directly to the sentimental bourgeois sensitivities of the audience, often relying on melodramatic cliches.
So it became a factory.
It became a factory churning out predictable, depressing narratives designed for quick consumption.
So he was working within an industry that valued commerce over intellectual depth. How did a future master like Dreyer tolerate that environment?
He didn't really. This is where his background gives us a critical clue. Before becoming a filmmaker, Dreyer was a sharp, satirical journalist. Calling that demand for social observation, truth, and biting clarity, it didn't just disappear when he started editing film.
So that satirical eye was his secret weapon against the mediocre scripting.
Precisely. His most important pictures were always based on reliable literary sources and concentrated on grand moral dilemmas, immediately setting him apart from the bulk of the domestic Danish production. He found Danish cinema too parochial.
Too small.
Yeah, too limited, too narrowly focused on domestic fluff.
That makes perfect sense. He spent 7 years mastering the craft. But once he gained that skill, he realized he had to escape the creative constraints of his home country.
Which is why he sought work internationally. He was too ambitious, too analytical to stick around writing cliched death scenes for a predictable bourgeois audience. His move to svensk film industry in Sweden to make The Parson's Widow was a deliberate act of seeking a better creative environment.
Okay, that establishes the groundwork. He brings exceptional technical skill and a satirical, observant eye to his new project. Let's pivot now to the film itself, The Parson's Widow, or Prästänkan.
And we can't stress the immediate tonal contrast enough. We are talking about a film that, according to our sources, does not contain even a hint of the dignified cerebral intensity of his later iconic films.
Not at all.
It is a genuine, robust folktale, infused with humor.
Let's confirm the details for the listener. Directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer, based on the short story Prästänkan by Christopher Jansen. Crucially, the beautiful photography was handled by George Schneevoigt, and it was produced by Svensk Filmindustri, or SF. Giving him that Swedish connection.
So what's this humorous plot based on? It's set in idyllic Norway, roughly 300 years ago. The plot is simple. A young curate named Sufren applies for a coveted pastor's job. He's ambitious, and he wins the post.
But the victory comes with a massive ancient tradition attached, which he somehow failed to research beforehand.
A pretty important detail to miss.
Right. Whoever wins the job must marry the widow of his predecessor.
And not just a predecessor, but Margaret, the highly vigorous widow of his 3 previous predecessors.
That's bad news because Sufren already has a fiancée, Maury, and the whole point of getting the job was to marry her immediately.
Right.
So since he's obligated by tradition to marry Marguerite, he comes up with a questionable plan.
A classic comedic premise, really. He smuggles Mari into the vicarage, introducing her to Margaret and the household as his sister, and then installs her as a simple maid.
It sets up the perfect conflict. The young lovers are hiding in plain sight, hoping that Margaret, the massive obstacle to their happiness, will soon pass away so they can claim the post and their marriage.
But Margaret is, as the source describes her, full of vigor.
Oh.
She is robust, she runs the household with an iron hand, and she is clearly in no hurry whatsoever to exit this mortal coil. The deception has to continue indefinitely.
Their increasing impatience and their futile attempts to manipulate the situation are what give the film its comedic structure. This is where we see that surprising, down-to-earth humor that makes this film so unique in Dreyer's catalog.
It's the practical, almost earthy elements that signal his journalistic eye for observation shining through. He wasn't afraid to embrace the common, even the crude details of human life.
Let's talk specifics. Forget a grand, divinely inspired sermon. When Sufren wins a preaching contest, how does he do it?
He wins by being a bit of a trickster. He surreptitiously sticks a large feather in the hat of his competitor. The congregation, seeing this absurdity, completely breaks down into laughter. The judges take that laughter as enthusiasm for Sufren's speech, and he wins the job. It's pure, low-stakes manipulation.
It's marvelous. And that spirit of comical realism extends right into the sacred space. The source notes the wonderful detail of the beadle, the church officer waking the sleeping faithful during the service by poking them with a ridiculously long stick.
That is the ultimate cinematic contrast to the intense spiritual agony Dreyer would later portray. Here, religion is a social setting where people fall asleep and need a physical prod to pay attention. It grounds the film in reality.
And the couple's increasingly desperate attempts to resolve their problem, meaning their attempts to scare Margaret into an early grave, are handled with a twinkle in the eye. The situation is so ridiculous that the audience is invited to laugh at their wicked intentions.
And of course, the wise old woman constantly outwits them. When they try to pull a scare tactic, she simply exchanges beds with Mari, foiling the young couple's plan entirely and adding to the frustration.
That kind of robust physical comedy, the feather trick, the stick, the bed switch, it sounds almost too commercial for the director who would later focus on minute expressions of guilt and piety. Was Dreyer sacrificing his artistic principles just to get work with Svensk Filmindustri?
That's an important question, but I think the sources suggest the answer is no. While he was adhering to the genre requirements of a folktale, he anchored it in genuine realism, which was always an artistic demand for him.
How did he achieve that authenticity?
He didn't film it on a cheap set. He insisted on location shooting in Norway, specifically in a real 17th century museum village located in the famous Gudbrandsdal Valley. This gives the film its texture and believability.
And since he was working for SF, it's understandable that Dreyer followed the precedents set by Swedish cinema in its luminous use of Scandinavian landscapes. So he married the visual splendor, the realism of the location, with the comedic structure.
And this is where we connect the dots back to his later seriousness. Despite the robust comedy, Dreyer maintains his core skill learned from his journalistic training, the profound honesty of the character's psychology. This is not a flat farce. It is still a story about real people facing real, messy moral decisions. And that focus remains Dreyer's lifelong artistic hallmark, whether he's making you laugh or weep.
So if the comedy brings us in, The genuine human interaction keeps us hooked.
Yeah.
Now we need to discuss the resolution. How does this massive moral dilemma, the forced marriage, the deception, the impatience, how does it finally break?
It breaks through compassion. As often happens in drama, crisis reveals truth. Mari, the fiancée disguised as the maid, suffers a serious accident.
And Sofren, the young curate, is seen keeping a constant, weeks-long vigil at her bedside. This is the moment Margaret, the formidable widow, realizes the depth of genuine, selfless feeling between the two young people.
And it's the turning point for her entire existence. She reveals her own history, a secret she's held for decades. She tells them that she, too, underwent the exact same ordeal in her youth, forced into a marriage of obligation to the very first pastor while loving another.
That knowledge must be devastating for the young couple, but also incredibly humanizing for the obstacle they were trying to scare to death.
It transforms her from a plot device into a fully rounded character. The revelation justifies her eventual act of grace. Once Mari recovers, Margaret resolves the whole situation with dignity. She gives the young couple valuable life advice, says a moving farewell to the entire household, and then, with purpose, departs life.
She chooses her time, essentially. It is a wonderfully neat and dignified exit that grants freedom to the next generation.
Thematically, this is complex. If Dreyer is known for films dealing with intense faith, where does the religious element of The Parson's Widow fit in?
The source clarifies this perfectly. Religion always fascinated Dreyer as a central focus of social behavior and moral decisions. His entire career was framed by his lifelong ambition to film the life of Christ.
Right.
However, in The Parson's Widow, the theme is entirely external rather than spiritual.
Meaning it's about the rules, the traditions, the social laws, the structure of the church community and its expectations, not a personal, agonizing struggle with the mystery of faith, which would define his later work.
Exactly. Here, the church is a social arena where people win jobs by cheating with feathers.
And if we need any more proof of his immediate versatility, look at the film that immediately preceded it. Blade F.F. Satan's Bog from 1919.
It was a monumental project.
Yeah, a massive 4-part panorama, the Danish counterpart of D.W. Griffith's Intolerance, covering historical episodes from Judas's betrayal up through the brutal struggle of Finnish patriots against Soviet aggression in 1918.
Moving from an epic, morally heavy, globe-spanning saga like that to a single, localized, humorous Norwegian folktale demonstrates more than just versatility. It shows absolute command over completely different cinematic registers, all within the first 2 years of his feature career.
It tells you that the technical skill learned at Nordic was always paired with an observant, journalistic mind capable of handling any subject, whether it was social critique or spiritual agony.
So what does this all mean for you? The key takeaway from this is to challenge the perception of the serious master. Dreyer, often defined by his intensity, used his technical skill and his satirical eye for observation to create an authentic, highly entertaining, and humorous folktale.
He proved that mastery is not confined to one genre. It is a film that still adheres to his lifelong interest in the complexity of human psychology and moral decisions, but it does so through earthly realism, laughter, and a sense of grace.
And as a final provocative thought, let's go back to Margaret. She starts as a figure of rigid social obligation, using her power and vigor to run the household, obstructing the happiness of the young lovers.
Yet she becomes the figure of forgiveness and legacy, resolving the central moral conflict and choosing her own dignified departure. What does it tell you about the power of time and generational duty when the widow of 3 predecessors, a woman trapped by tradition, chooses to die only after ensuring the new couple has the freedom she herself was denied decades earlier?
That's a wonderful, complex idea about the handing over of power and forgiveness that is worth spending some time mulling over. Thank you for sharing your sources with us as we uncovered this unexpected gem of silent cinema.
Until next time.